When people hear a phrase like, hurt his ego and he'll love you madly, they often imagine playing games, making someone jealous, or intentionally causing emotional pain. But the truth is much deeper than that. Real attraction is not created by damaging someone else's self-esteem. In many cases, what people describe as hurting his ego is actually something entirely different. It is the moment a man realizes that your love, attention, and presence are valuable and should never be taken for granted. Human nature has a strange tendency. People sometimes become so accustomed to having something that they stop noticing its importance. This doesn't always come from bad intentions. Familiarity can create comfort, but it can also create complacency. When someone knows you'll always be there no matter what, they may unconsciously begin treating your effort as something guaranteed instead of something precious. This is why self-respect is so powerful. Many women spend enormous amounts of energy trying to keep a man's attention. They constantly initiate conversations, always make themselves available, and place his needs above their own. They become so focused on maintaining the relationship that they slowly forget themselves. Ironically, the more they give without balance, the more the relationship can begin to feel one-sided. Psychologists often explain that appreciation grows when people recognize value. And value is difficult to recognize when something feels unlimited and automatic. Think about anything meaningful in life. People tend to appreciate what requires care, effort, and attention. Not because scarcity creates love, but because awareness creates appreciation. When a woman starts valuing herself, something changes. She stops chasing constant reassurance. She stops making her entire world revolve around another person. She continues caring deeply, but she also remembers that her own happiness matters. Her goals matter. Her peace matters. Her identity matters. This shift often surprises men who have become accustomed to receiving unlimited attention. Suddenly they realize that her affection was never something they were entitled to. It was a gift. And gifts lose their magic when people begin treating them like guarantees. What's fascinating is that many men don't fully understand what they're feeling in these moments. They may describe it as missing her, or suddenly thinking about her more often. But underneath those emotions is often a deeper realization. They're becoming aware of her value in a way they hadn't before. This is not about making someone suffer. It is about refusing to abandon yourself in the process of loving someone else. A woman with healthy boundaries naturally creates respect because she communicates something important without even saying it. She says, I care about you, but I also care about myself. I choose you, but I will not lose myself trying to keep you. And there is something incredibly attractive about that kind of confidence. Men are often drawn to women who have their own lives, passions, dreams, and standards. Not because those women are unavailable, but because they are complete. They are not desperately seeking validation. They are sharing their lives, not sacrificing them. Another interesting truth is that attraction tends to fade when effort disappears. If one person is doing all the giving while the other simply receives, appreciation often weakens over time. But when both people invest, both people value the connection more deeply. This is why many men suddenly become more attentive when they sense a woman reclaiming her energy. They realize she is not waiting endlessly for crumbs of affection. She respects herself enough to expect reciprocity, and that realization challenges something inside them. Not their dignity, but their assumptions. Because sometimes what people call hurting his ego is really just the shock of discovering that a woman's love should never have been taken for granted. And when a man realizes that your presence is a privilege rather than a guarantee, appreciation often grows into a deeper kind of love built on respect instead of entitlement. One of the most attractive qualities a person can possess is something that many people spend years trying to develop. It isn't beauty, wealth, or even charm. It is emotional security. And one of the reasons some become more invested in a woman is not because she hurts his ego, but because she stops living for his approval. This is something many people misunderstand. In the early stages of attraction, it's natural to care about what someone thinks. We all want to be liked, appreciated, and accepted. But sometimes, without realizing it, people place too much of their happiness in someone else's hands. They begin measuring their worth based on attention, messages, compliments, or validation from the other person. Slowly, their entire emotional world starts revolving around one individual, and that's where problems often begin. When a woman constantly seeks a man's approval, she unintentionally places him on a pedestal. She begins making his reactions more important than her own peace. A good text message lifts her mood. A delayed response ruins her day. His attention becomes the source of her confidence. And over time, this changes the entire dynamic, because attraction thrives in mutual respect, not emotional dependence. Psychologists often explain that confidence is deeply connected to self-validation. Emotionally secure people enjoy love, affection, and appreciation, but they do not depend entirely on them to feel valuable. They understand that their worth existed before the relationship and will continue to exist regardless of another person's choices. And there is something incredibly magnetic about that kind of energy. When a woman stops seeking constant approval, she becomes calmer. She stops overanalyzing every message. She stops trying to earn affection through endless sacrifice. She no longer feels the need to prove her value because she already recognizes it. What's fascinating is that this shift often catches a man's attention, not because she has become cold or distant, but because her energy has changed. Instead of chasing reassurance, she radiates confidence. Instead of asking, "Do you like me enough?" she quietly communicates, "I know who I am and I'm happy with myself." This change can challenge a man's ego in unexpected ways. If he has become accustomed to being the center of her world, suddenly seeing her emotionally secure forces him to reconsider his assumptions. He realizes that her happiness does not depend entirely on his attention. He understands that she has standards, priorities, dreams, and a life that exists outside the relationship. And strangely enough, this often creates greater respect. Human beings naturally appreciate what they cannot control. Not because control itself is attractive, but because autonomy commands admiration. People respect individuals who stand confidently on their own rather than desperately clinging to others. Another interesting truth is that many men actually enjoy earning affection. Deep down, most people value things they have invested effort into. They enjoy knowing that their actions matter. They appreciate feeling chosen rather than assumed. But when a woman constantly seeks approval, she unintentionally removes that opportunity. She gives everything before he has learned to appreciate it. She overfunctions while he simply receives. A balanced relationship works differently. Both people invest. Both people contribute. Both people choose each other. Neither person feels superior, and neither person feels dependent. There is mutual respect instead of emotional imbalance. And when a woman becomes emotionally secure, she stops making fear-based decisions. She doesn't panic when a text arrives late. She doesn't abandon her goals to keep someone interested. She doesn't sacrifice her peace to maintain attention. Instead, she trusts that the right person will appreciate her without needing endless persuasion. Ironically, this confidence often makes her more attractive than ever before, not because she is playing games, but because she is demonstrating something powerful. She is showing that love is something she shares, not something she begs for. And sometimes, the moment a man realizes that your happiness doesn't depend on his approval is the moment he begins valuing your presence far more deeply, because confidence has a way of awakening admiration that desperation never can. One of the biggest misconceptions about attraction is the belief that giving more, being constantly available, and making someone the center of your world will automatically make them value you more. While love certainly requires generosity, support, and effort, there is an important psychological truth that many people overlook. Human beings tend to appreciate things more when they recognize that those things are meaningful and not endlessly guaranteed. This is where many relationships quietly lose their balance. One person becomes so focused on maintaining the connection that they gradually abandon everything else. Their schedule revolves around the relationship. Their priorities shift entirely. Their goals become secondary. They are always available, always accommodating, always ready to drop everything for the other person. At first, this level of devotion may seem romantic, but over time, something unexpected can happen. Constant availability begins to feel normal. What was once appreciated becomes expected. And when something becomes expected, people often stop consciously recognizing its value. Psychologists often explain this through a principle known as scarcity. Human beings naturally place greater importance on things they understand are limited and meaningful. This doesn't mean playing games or pretending to be unavailable. It means understanding that a healthy relationship should never require you to disappear from your own life. Think about the most fulfilled people you know. They have relationships, but they also have dreams, responsibilities, friendships, passions, and personal goals. Their happiness is not built on one person alone. They bring fullness into a relationship rather than expecting the relationship to provide all of their fulfillment. And that balance creates something incredibly attractive. When a woman maintains her own identity, she sends a powerful message without saying a word. She communicates that love is important, but it is not the only thing that defines her. She has ambitions, she has interests, she has a life she enjoys. And because of that, her attention becomes meaningful rather than automatic. Many men are drawn to this because it creates admiration. They see someone who values herself enough to continue investing in her own growth. Instead of losing herself in the relationship, she brings her best self into it. What's fascinating is that people often mistake this balance for mystery. They assume mystery means being secretive or emotionally unavailable. In reality, mystery often comes from having a rich, fulfilling life that doesn't revolve entirely around another person. A woman who has her own goals, friendships, and passions naturally remains interesting because she continues evolving. She brings new experiences, new ideas, and new energy into the relationship. She doesn't stop being an individual just because she is in love. Another important truth is that attraction tends to weaken when predictability turns into complacency. This doesn't mean consistency is bad. Consistency builds trust. But there is a difference between being reliable and making yourself endlessly available at the expense of your own well-being. Healthy relationships are built when two complete people choose each other while continuing to grow individually. Neither person becomes the entire universe for the other. Instead, they become valuable parts of each other's lives. This creates appreciation because both people recognize that the relationship exists alongside dreams, goals, and personal growth. They understand that time together is valuable because it is chosen, not because it is endlessly available. Ironically, maintaining your own life often strengthens the relationship rather than weakening it. When you continue pursuing your passions and protecting your peace, you bring confidence, excitement, and energy into the connection. You stop relying on someone else to complete you because you already have a life worth sharing. And sometimes, what people call scarcity is simply the quiet power of a woman who remembers that loving someone deeply does not require abandoning herself. Because when your life remains full, meaningful, and balanced, your presence becomes something that is appreciated, not because it is rare, but because it is genuinely valuable. And valuable things are cherished far more than things people assume will always be there. One of the greatest misconceptions people have about attraction is believing that emotional breakdowns, desperate chasing, or endless pleading will make someone love them more. In reality, strength often creates far more admiration than desperation ever could, and sometimes what people describe as hurting a man's ego is actually something much simpler. It is the moment he sees that you did not allow disappointment to destroy you. Life has a way of testing people. Relationships don't always unfold exactly as we hope. There are misunderstandings, heartbreaks, disappointments, and moments when things don't go according to plan. During those times, people reveal who they truly are. Some collapse under pain and lose themselves completely. Others choose something different. They choose dignity. They choose growth. They choose peace. And that choice often leaves a lasting impression. Many men unconsciously expect emotional dependence. Not necessarily because they are selfish, but because human beings naturally become accustomed to being needed. When someone is always available, always waiting, and always placing their happiness in another person's hands, the dynamic becomes predictable. But when a woman faces disappointment with grace, instead of desperation, something changes. She surprises him. Instead of chasing endlessly, she focuses on herself. Instead of making her life smaller, she begins expanding it. Instead of allowing rejection or uncertainty to define her worth, she continues moving forward. And that kind of strength has a quiet power that is impossible to ignore. Psychologists often explain that resilience creates admiration. Human beings are naturally drawn to people who demonstrate emotional stability because strength communicates confidence. It shows that a person's identity is not entirely dependent on external circumstances. It reveals that while pain may hurt, It does not control them. What's fascinating is that confidence becomes most visible after disappointment. Anyone can appear strong when life is easy. Anyone can smile when everything is going perfectly. But true emotional strength is revealed when things become difficult. It appears in the woman who continues pursuing her goals after heartbreak. It appears in the woman who protects her peace instead of seeking revenge. It appears in the woman who refuses to abandon herself simply because someone else failed to recognize her value. And sometimes, seeing that strength awakens something inside a man. He begins to realize that she was never weak. He begins to understand that her love came from choice, not dependency. He sees someone who cared deeply, but who also respects herself enough to continue living fully regardless of what happens. There is something deeply admirable about that. Because emotional maturity is rare, many people react to pain by becoming bitter, angry, or obsessed with proving something. But resilience looks different. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't demand attention. It quietly focuses on growth. And growth changes people. A woman who invests in herself becomes more confident. She discovers new strengths. She develops greater self-respect. She becomes more emotionally secure. Her energy changes because she no longer views her happiness as something another person controls. Ironically, this often reignites respect and attraction, not because she is trying to make someone regret losing her, but because she radiates something powerful. She radiates self-worth. Men often admire women who stand tall during difficult seasons. Not because those women pretend not to feel pain, but because they prove that pain does not define them. They prove that love does not require losing dignity. They prove that disappointment can become growth rather than destruction. And perhaps that is what truly challenges a man's pride. Not seeing you suffer, not watching you beg, but realizing that despite everything, you chose peace over chaos, growth over bitterness, and self-respect over desperation, because there is something unforgettable about a woman who turns heartbreak into strength, disappointment into wisdom, and pain into purpose. And sometimes that quiet resilience creates more admiration than 1,000 attempts to hold on ever could. One of the greatest mistakes people make in relationships is believing that once someone falls in love, effort is no longer necessary. They assume attraction will simply maintain itself forever. But the truth is that love, like anything valuable, thrives when both people continue investing in it. And one of the reasons men sometimes become even more attached is because they feel inspired to keep choosing, pursuing, and winning the heart of the woman they love. This doesn't mean turning relationships into games. It doesn't mean creating jealousy, withholding affection, or making someone constantly prove themselves. Healthy love is not built on insecurity. But attraction does require continued effort. And effort naturally grows when both people remember that love is something to nurture, not something to take for granted. Think back to the beginning of any meaningful relationship. There was excitement, there was curiosity, there was intentionality. Conversations mattered. Small gestures felt special. Both people wanted to impress each other and make each other feel valued. The relationship felt alive because both individuals were actively investing in the connection. But over time, many couples become comfortable, and while comfort is beautiful, complacency is dangerous. Psychologists often explain that people value what they invest in. When someone puts time, attention, emotion, and effort into something, they naturally become more attached to it. That's why relationships tend to deepen when both people continue contributing rather than assuming love will survive on autopilot. Many men actually enjoy the feeling of pursuing the woman they love. Not because they want competition, but because pursuit creates meaning. There is satisfaction in making someone smile, planning thoughtful moments, and knowing that their effort matters. Deep down, people enjoy feeling appreciated for what they bring into a relationship. Problems often begin when one person stops growing, stops investing, or starts believing that love no longer requires attention. Attraction doesn't usually disappear overnight. More often, it fades through neglect. Familiarity becomes routine, routine becomes complacency, and eventually people stop treating each other with the same care that once brought them together. This is why maintaining your individuality is so important. A woman who continues pursuing her own dreams, interests, friendships, and growth remains fascinating because she continues evolving. She doesn't stop being herself just because she's in love. She brings new experiences, new energy, and new perspectives into the relationship. There is always something fresh because she continues becoming more of who she was meant to be, and that naturally inspires continued admiration. Mystery in its healthiest form doesn't come from secrecy or emotional distance. It comes from depth. It comes from being a person who continues learning, growing, and discovering new passions. It comes from having a life that is rich enough that your identity doesn't disappear inside the relationship. Men often become more attached to women who possess this balance because they never feel like the relationship has become stagnant. They continue discovering new layers. They continue feeling inspired to invest. They continue feeling proud to be part of her life, and this works both ways. Healthy relationships are not built when one person constantly chases while the other passively receives. The strongest relationships are built when both people continue choosing each other. Both continue flirting. Both continue appreciating. Both continue growing. Both continue making each other feel valued. What's beautiful about this dynamic is that love never becomes something either person takes for granted. Appreciation remains alive because effort remains alive. Over time, attraction transforms into something deeper than excitement. It becomes admiration. It becomes friendship. It becomes respect. And those qualities create bonds that are far stronger than temporary passion. Because in the end, men don't fall deeply in love because they are forced to chase. They fall deeply in love when they feel inspired to keep choosing, appreciating, and investing in a woman who never stopped valuing herself and never stopped bringing her best self into the relationship. And when both hearts continue winning each other, instead of assuming love is guaranteed, attachment grows stronger with every season rather than weaker with time. By now it becomes clear that the title, "Hurt His Ego and He'll Love You Madly," can be misleading. It suggests that love is created through pain, manipulation, or emotional games. It implies that damaging someone's pride will somehow make them more devoted. But if you look closely at what truly creates lasting attraction, you discover something very different. Real love is never built by hurting someone's ego. It is built by respecting your own value and allowing mutual appreciation to grow naturally. Human beings crave respect. Men do, women do, everyone does. Deep emotional connection cannot survive where there is humiliation, constant mind games, or attempts to control another person's feelings. Those things may create temporary obsession, anxiety, or confusion, but they do not create healthy love. Psychologists often explain that secure relationships are built on emotional safety. People open their hearts when they feel respected, appreciated, and accepted. Trust grows when both individuals feel valued, and attraction deepens when both people freely choose each other instead of trying to manipulate each other's emotions. This is why self-respect is so powerful. When a woman understands her worth, she no longer needs to play games to maintain someone's attention. She doesn't need to create jealousy. She doesn't need to pretend not to care. She doesn't need to make someone suffer to feel important. Instead, she quietly carries herself with confidence because she knows her value doesn't depend on another person's reactions, and that confidence changes everything. A woman who respects herself naturally creates standards. She expects kindness. She values honesty. She protects her peace. She gives love freely, but she does not beg for it. She forgives, but she does not tolerate disrespect. She supports others, but she does not abandon herself in the process. What's fascinating is that this kind of self-respect often creates more attraction than any strategy ever could, because people are naturally drawn to authenticity. A woman who knows her worth communicates something powerful without saying a word. She says, "I don't need to manipulate you. I don't need to chase you. I don't need to prove my value. I know who I am, and I choose relationships that honor that." And mature men recognize the beauty in that. Real love is not about making someone feel small. It's about inspiring each other to become better. It's about creating a relationship where both people feel safe enough to be vulnerable and strong enough to grow together. Another important truth is that healthy attraction cannot survive where respect disappears. You may be able to trigger jealousy. You may be able to create emotional highs and lows. You may even create temporary obsession. But obsession and love are not the same thing. Obsession often comes from fear. Love comes from freedom. Obsession says, "I need to control you." Love says, "I choose you." Obsession creates anxiety. Love creates peace. Obsession fears losing. Love values growing. This is why emotionally mature relationships feel different. Neither person spends their energy trying to outsmart the other. Neither person is trying to protect their ego at all costs. Instead, both people focus on understanding, trust, communication, and mutual appreciation. The irony is that when you stop trying to manipulate love, love often becomes stronger. When you stop chasing validation, confidence naturally grows. When you stop trying to make someone love you, you become free to recognize who genuinely does. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The goal was never to hurt his ego. The goal was never to make him regret, suffer, or become obsessed. The goal was to remember your own value, protect your peace, and allow the right man to appreciate the incredible person you already are. Because lasting love is never created by breaking someone's pride. It is created when two people with healthy self-respect choose each other again and again, building a relationship where admiration, trust, and genuine affection grow far beyond anything manipulation could ever achieve.